Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. Welcome to Social Studies today's class. This week we are going to discuss a new chapter. It's the start of the new chapter, which is the new nations emerge. Our first lesson is the independent nations of South Asia. This is chapter number 19. You can find the lesson on page number 652 of your textbook. Starting with the lesson, let's start with our objective of the lesson. The objectives, they say that you must be able to understand why independence brought partition to South Asia. You must be able to describe how Indian leaders built a new nation. You must be able to summarize how Pakistan and Bangladesh they grew apart. You must be able to describe the reasons for ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. You must be able to explain the role played by India and Pakistan during the Cold War. Partition. Partition means to divide something to a division. Six, they are a religious minority in India. They are not Muslims. They are not a Muslim division actually. They are a subdivision of Hinduism. So they are a religious minority in India and they are a majority in one state inside India which is bordering Pakistan. Its name is Punjab. Um, Kashmir, it is a state which is partially controlled by India and partially controlled by Pakistan. But both India and Pakistan, they claim that the entire state of Kashmir belongs to whether India or Pakistanis, they claim to that entire state of Kashmir belongs to Pakistan. So it is a subject of dispute between the two nations since the partition. Jawaharlal Nehru was the first Indian Prime Minister after independence who served the office from 1947 until 1964. Dalits, they are one of a social segment of Indian society. They are considered the lowest in the social hierarchy of the Indian society, and in the past, their social status was that they were considered untouchables. Later on, in British rulers, they make it unconstitutional or illegal, and although the practice now officially or constitutionally is invalid in India, but to some extent it is still being practiced in India even today. Although officially or legally it is illegal to call someone Dalit or to treat someone as an untouchable in India. Indira Gandhi. Indira Gandhi was the daughter of the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, which we just described in the previous slide. She served the office of Prime Minister two times from 1966 to 1977 and 1980 to 1984. Punjab, as I just told you, that is a large state in India which is dominated by the Sikh minority. They are bordering Pakistan. Golden Temple is the most or the holiest shrine of the Sikh religion. It is in Punjab. It's located in Amritsar. So this is just like Haram or Makkah is holiest to Muslims. Golden Temple is holiest to the Sikhs. Bangladesh is a country today which was once the East Pakistan and it got independence from East Pakistan in 1971. Non-alignment, it's a kind of a political policy which means that a country will remain impartial in any dispute and it will not side with any of the two warring sides or two disputing sides. So it will remain unsided. It is a kind of a political and diplomatic independence, particularly during the Cold War, a rivalry between the two big powers. So we have our first question here is that how did the nationalist demands for independence affect South Asia and the world? First of all, you must know that during the Cold War, uh, sorry, during the World War One, British they used India to fight war in Europe. Indian soldiers they fought with the hope that they will get the trust of British and ultimately they will get independence. But they had to fight. All the Indians they had to fight for their independence following the World War Two. British grip in India became further and further weak, and ultimately they gave independence to both Muslims and Hindus as a separate countries. They divided when they were leaving India. So, among the first nations that got independence from British colonial empire after the World War II was India and Pakistan. So 14th August 1947, India and Pakistan both together on one day they got independence from Britain, but the independence created one of the world toughest conflict which is still going on. The division of the country was not acceptable to majority Hindus because they wanted to get a unified India from the British because they believed that they are in majority and ultimately they will rule the country because the power will naturally come into their hands. But Muslims they demanded a separation because they feared that the British when they will leave the country for them it will be no difference, just a change of cruel master. So they wanted a separation and a national identity based on their religion, that the country of Pakistan should be created where the Muslims should live a life according to their religion, and separation from the Hindus was demanded from the fear that they will not exploit their major they will not exploit their being minority. So that was the basic cause for the foundation of Pakistan. Mohandas Gandhi was the Congress leader and they wanted a unified India, whereas Muhammad Ali Jinnah was the leader of the Muslim League, those who wanted a separate homeland for the Muslims of the subcontinent. So ultimately, due to the hostilities between Hindus and Muslims going on at that time, British finally decided to divide India between the two new nations that will emerge as India and Pakistan. Pakistan was largely dominated by Muslims, and India was largely dominated by Hindus. The partition of South Asia actually created a huge scale of violence. Um, both sides there were mixed communities living on both sides of the border, newly created India and Pakistan. So people had to migrate from both sides. Hindus and Sikhs they migrated from newly created Pakistan into India, and Muslims they migrated from India into Pakistan. But there were hostilities from both sides, and migrating Muslims they were subject to their torture and you can say killings, large scale killings by the hands of Hindus, and same was retaliated from the Muslims in Pakistan where they attacked migrating Hindus that were leaving this area, the areas of Pakistan and going into India. So when the borders were defined, almost 10 million people they migrated from both sides, and ultimately thousands and thousands of people were killed. It is estimated that almost 1 million people were killed from both sides, and many more they died while being hungry on the way and continuously walking for thousands miles. So this was one of the big disaster which was created due to the independence of India. On one side, if the independence brought the happiness for the people of India and Pakistan, at the same time, it was one of the big disaster that humanity faced due to the division of the country. Mohandas Gandhi, the Prime Minister, the founder of India, He was assassinated soon after the independence of the country in 1948 by the extremist Hindus, those who wanted to keep the India unified, and they were opposed to Gandhi's efforts to reconcile with Muslims. Basically, Gandhi had a philosophy that he wanted a peaceful coexistence. But some extremist Hindus, they believe that Muslims have taken over a huge part of land, which was part of the Mother India. So now they were against Gandhi's policy of reconciliation. So based on this issue, the extremist Hindus, they managed to kill him. So this was the start of the Indian New India. And in terms of Pakistan, we are going to discuss what happened in the newly created Pakistan. The map clearly tells you the border, the brown country in the western side, just next to Afghanistan, it's Pakistan, and the red marked area, which is half brown and half green, is Kashmir, which is partially controlled by both countries and demanded wholly by both of them. India demands that all of Kashmir belongs to us, and Pakistan demands that all of Kashmir belongs to us. The dispute is basically based not on part of territory but based on terms of ethnicity. The majority of the people in Kashmir are Muslim, and they wanted to join India, but British, they left the state of Kashmir undivided, and they gave this choice to the people of Kashmir that if they want to join India or they want to join Pakistan, they can decide by themselves. But India then, following the uh, drawing of the borders, immediately dropped their paratroopers inside Kashmir because they had all the military resources in their control at the time of partition. So they managed to take control of half of the area, and the British giving this choice to Kashmiris was basically the product of their strategy to divide and rule. Whenever they left a colony, they created disputes behind them so that the people of the newly created nations should remain engaged in the disputes and wars and should remain economically and politically destable. And that is what you can see in Kashmir, that even 80 years since 75 years since the independence, the dispute of Kashmir is still there. Both sides are uh, Pakistan and India, they have fought 4 wars over the issue of Kashmir, and still the issue of Kashmir is unresolved. Uh, the Kashmir Valley, which is partially controlled by India and partially controlled by Pakistan, and some areas are under the control of China, its population structures can clearly be seen that around 77% of the people are Muslim. So at the time of division, when they decided to join Pakistan, India forcefully dropped its military forces into the territory, the valley of Kashmir, and creating a big dispute which is still there and have costed thousands of people inside India and in Indian held Kashmir, where the people are having an armed resistance to the occupation of Indian forces. So the dispute has created an alarming situation following the declaration of nuclear power from both the countries. Now, as both India and Pakistan are nuclear states, there is a big possibility that a small issue can turn into a big disaster over the issue of Kashmir. So this is the story of Kashmir, that how a big a territorial dispute has turned into an ethnic dispute, and now the situation is that both India and Pakistan possess nuclear weapon, and Kashmir has become a nuclear flashpoint. Uh, in 1970, the arms race between India and Pakistan developed. India was a country that had support from the Western countries to develop its nuclear technology. Pakistan, at the same time, was denied of this right of acquiring nuclear technology, but Both countries managed to develop their nuclear weapons despite some hostilities from the Western nations. By 1998, both of them they declared themselves publicly declared nuclear states. Uh, Becoming nuclear powers actually created a balance of power in the region, but their economical condition of both these countries is still not stable. It is not improved. They are economically uh, underdeveloped, and they have, although they have huge potential, but still they are locked in a military arms race, which has impacted both of the nations of Pakistan and India, and overall economic status of India and Pakistan remains poor. Some of the challenges that came to India soon after the independence, they were controlling the population. Um, for example, when 1947 Jawaharlal Nehru became the prime minister, for him the foremost priority was to improve the India's economy. Uh, to improve the India's economy and to manage the growing population, they needed to increase the output of the food. But the food output actually also increased the population growth beyond control. Government of India encouraged the family planning or to maintain or to control the birth rate, but with a very little success. And India became one of the most populous countries in the world today. It stands next to China in terms of population with almost 1.3 billion people reaching in near future. So this was one of the challenge which is still Indian government is trying to tackle. And At one side, if it is challenge to India's economy, at the same time, it has made the big population has made India a big market for the world, and where all the nations are trying to establish business relationship with India. So if it was a challenge in one side, at the same time, it was one of the source of making India a world's big market for bringing international businesses inside India. For India, the biggest challenge was to bring unity in diversity because India was a country that was its society was composed of social classes. So, lower caste Hindus, those who were known as Dalits, they faced discrimination. So, right from the start, the government of India, under the leadership of Nehru, they tried to create social balance inside the society. They created quotas for the job quotas for Dalits. They reserved the seats in universities for Dalits, and similarly jobs, similarly housing was improved for them. But still, the higher caste Hindus they got the better education and better jobs in the Indian society. It means that the discrimination continued with the Dalits, and to some extent, it is although illegal, but still being practiced today. After Nehru, India's Congress Party they elected Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi as next prime minister. She served the office of the prime minister in two terms. The dates are mentioned here, from 66 to 77 and from 80 to 84. But finally, she was assassinated in 1984 due to the episode of Golden Temple, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. But during his tenure, she showed a great leadership skills. She was one of the great supporter of the women's right, and she stand up against the discrimination in conservative Indian society against the women rights. So this actually brought him into the national front, and she is still recognized as one of the champion of the women's right in the country. But one of the worst episode that happened to her was the episode of Golden Temple, in which the Indian Armed Forces they were ordered by the government to uh, raid on the holiest shrine of the Sikhs, which was the Golden Temple, and as a result of this, some extremist Sikhs Actually, as a sort of revenge, they managed to kill Indira Gandhi. This is what I think next slide is all about. Uh, India is the world's largest democracy in terms of population, but it has faced great difficulty in creating this unity. India has languages, over hundreds, major languages and dialects that challenge its unity. It has a religious diversity of Hindus, Muslims. Hindu are the majority, with Muslims as the second, or you can say as the biggest minority. Following Muslims, there are Sikhs, there are Christians, there are many other small level religions that are in Indian society. So India is a country which can clearly show a unity in diversity, although they have internal issues, internal disputes. But even until that moment, until today, Indian government is capable or very skillfully managing this issue of diversity, and has maintained its grip over all the separation movements. And until now, even Kashmir, even Assam, there are some other areas that are demanding separation, but Indian government has successfully maintained control over all these separation movements. This is what I have just discussed one slide before, the issue of Golden Temple. Sikhs in Punjab, they wanted separation, and ultimately in 1984, some armed Sikhs, they took over the holiest shrine as a kind of protest. But Indian government sent soldiers to put down the revolt. Ultimately, the Sikhs, in a fire of revenge, they managed to kill the Indian Prime Minister who ordered the raid on the Golden Temple, or the Sikh holiest shrine. Modern times, Bharatiya Janata Party has emerged as one of the secular party ruling the country since around 2005 onward. During that time, Congress has taken the control of power once, but in current times, BJP has emerged as one of the strongest candidate in terms of ruling the country. Uh, but under the BJP's rule, Hindu-Muslim violence has emerged all through its first period and the current two periods that are in successive.